A gigaton news event happened. Phil Spencer is retiring from Xbox after a long and illustrious career. 38 years, man, that's even longer than me by 2 years. And we were kind of the belief that Sarah Bond would be taken over. It did seem that she was being groomed for the role. However, she's leaving as well. And we have a new EVP and CEO coming in the form of Asha Sharma. The supporter question is from Retro Sean. This will no doubt make it into the Q&A show. It's probably too late for the direct, correct? But thoughts about the sudden departure of Phil Spencer and Sarah Bond from Xbox. This reminds me of when the CEO of Intel, Pat Gelsinger, quote unquote, retired before he was able to see his plans come to fruition. John, I'm going to come to you first on this. This is kind of crazy news, right? I mean, it is effectively a complete reorganization of top Xbox level management.
Yeah, indeed. And it's a delicate, interesting topic. And this is so. I think it's fair to say that the last few years have been rough for Xbox. We all quite liked Phil. He did, he worked with us well. He cared about what Digital Foundry was doing. We got that opportunity to see Series X and Series S before its release. You got to see the Xbox One X before release. Like there was a good rapport there, I think, and I think they tried a lot of things, and I think Phil himself was a guy that really cared about this stuff, and I always had good chats with him on this. So, but 38 years, a long time. That's certainly, I can understand the desire to move on, and I do think that a lot of the things that have happened to Xbox are not necessarily directly tied to what he would have liked to have done. This is just spitballing here, but it's very clear in recent years that Microsoft as a company has shifted gears and is now extremely focused on AI, like some of these other tech companies, to the point of like borderline ruin to a degree. Like, not that they're not making money, but like it feels like everything that's not AI is not valuable to the current leadership there. And thus that part's concerning, but at the same time I do understand why changes would need to be made here, perhaps, because I do think the last 3 or 4 years of Xbox, despite them finally starting to deliver some truly excellent games from their stable of developers, it hasn't gone well for the platform itself. Even though I see the value in it, I still think that they made some key mistakes along the way. I don't think Game Pass was ever going to remain a viable thing, and it was always going to come to this. The price was going to go up. It was going to, cause a lot of issues for various parties. Even though the deal was pretty nuts, it's less so now, but I just didn't think it was sustainable, and I think that's still very much the case. And I don't think Satya is interested in just continuing to throw money into that specifically, not when that money could go to Copilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then things like, oh man, it's really difficult to say what could have worked or if there even was a way out of this, because the game, on top of everything, like the game world is just changing a lot these days, and it's an Xbox. Just, man, they never fully recovered from what happened with the shift to Xbox One, I feel.
Right.
And I'm not sure what else they could have done to really save this at that point. Like, I mean, the PS5 is selling on par with the PS4, right? And yet Sony's release this generation has arguably been one of their worst. Like, there's been amazing games coming from them, but there's barely anything compared to before. This could have been a great time for them to strike, but they just weren't able to pull it off. And, so I understand this change, but I'm definitely nervous because putting somebody that's clearly with an AI background into place, I don't know, man. I really don't know what to think yet. But also, I think you can't just like, people put a lot of like, I guess they assign so much to like these singular people that are in charge of these divisions, and they are important, but there's so much more that matters in terms of how a business performs and the direction they go in. And that has a lot to do with the team running all this stuff and the ones that are actually getting this stuff done. So we can't just look at one person. Maybe this new person is will be able to support those teams and those everyone and give them the resources they need to succeed and find a new life for Xbox. Maybe their vision of what Xbox will be is something totally different. I mean, it's all stuff we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, just to sort of carry on from what you said, yeah, we do know Phil as well as a journalist can know Phil, I guess. Yeah, he's always been very open with us. He's always been supportive as much as he can be. And he also recognizes constructive criticism. And, we've certainly given them a lot of that. So, I'm going to miss him because, he was forthright with us, and we do value that. And Sarah was great as well at the Xbox Series X.
Yeah, I think I only met her that one time, and it was good.
So it's really sort of the amount of heat these guys get when you've met them in real life and when you see them as real people. It's there's a sort of weird disconnect there. In terms of what's happened with Xbox, clearly it's a time of transition, right? And it's still a time of transition. And they've tried their best to navigate the waters there, but I think it's been very, very challenging. And the whole 4 games thing, it's just going to live on forever, really. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like a bit of a fumble, I think. In terms of what happens next, obviously Asha Sharma is now taking over. But you're quite right, John. Basically the concept that somebody who may not have a great background in games is taking over a team on the surface might not be great, but at the same time, they're taking over a team. Do they have to be like a hardcore gamer? Phil, to be fair, Phil was very much into his games.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we met up in those times, like he could actually hold his own in terms of like understanding, and not just like Xbox stuff, but like games in general across all platforms. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That was interesting.
He was deeply committed.
And I think that's cool. And I do appreciate when leadership actually cares, because I do think it helps determine what's allowed to get made and but obviously if there's people above him that are pushing in other ways, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but going back maybe to the reveal of the PlayStation 4, which was a massively successful system for Sony, it was Andrew House leading that presentation, if memory serves. And it's not as if people were thinking, wow, Andrew House, such a great thing.
Exactly.
That's not the way things work in massive corporate structures.
No.
So, I think Asha Sharma needs to be given the benefit of the doubt. Let's talk about some of the stuff she's going to be championing as the new CEO of Xbox. First of all, great games, she says. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, right? This one is curious, though. Second, the return of Xbox. We will recommit to our core Xbox fans and players, those who have invested with us for the past 25 years, and to the developers who build the expansive universes and experiences that are embraced by players across the world. They're talking about, or she's talking about rather, celebrating our roots with a renewed commitment to Xbox, starting with console, which has shaped who we are. The final thing, the future of play, new business models and new ways to play by leaning into what we already have, iconic teams, characters, and worlds that people love. But we will not treat those worlds as static IP, to milk and monetize. We will build a shared platform and tools that empower developers and players to create and share their own stories. And then there is a sort of discussion about the evolution of monetization and AI. Yes, I mean, in terms of that statement, I'm still not entirely sure what it means. The return of Xbox, I guess we've got new hardware coming along, but, everything that we've heard about the hardware suggests that it's quite different to what we've seen before. There seems to be a commitment here, or certainly a reassurance to hardcore Xbox players that, hey, they're still invested in console. But to what extent are they? This new machine sounds incredible, but it also sounds incredibly expensive, which is kind of like the antithesis of what a console is about. I don't think you can suddenly expect to see massive U-turns from Microsoft just because of a change in leadership. These U-turns take years to execute. if indeed there is a U-turn. So yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure what the future holds, but obviously, I wish Asha Sharma the best. Alex.
Yeah, my goodness. Well, one thing that I even commented on online about this is it coming out on a late Friday night, this news story from our perspective in the EU time zones. That doesn't actually sound nearly as promising or as good of a thing as in announcing it on a Monday to start the week. Just to say.
Well, you're quite right, Alex. Bad news is always put out on a Friday.
Yeah, so that really tainted my opinion of as everything was, because it does, there's not a lot of time for the press to react to it. Maybe the markets aren't reacting to it for purposeful reasons. So that was not a great thing. And then I read immediately that it's someone coming from an AI and not a games background. And while that does align with the current future of Microsoft, maybe it doesn't align with what I prioritize when I'm interested in looking at games from a publisher, as I view Microsoft at the moment, and less so a console development house. I don't view them as such anymore for a while now, and I think a lot of people don't. So all those things really didn't make me feel super positive about the story. And I'm still very open. I guess I'll be open to this new person, Asha Sharma, coming in and seeing what they do for it. But that's going to take a while to actually see what the effects of this are. And yeah, I'll be open, but I don't have a lot of confidence at the moment. Regarding the legacy of Phil Spencer specifically, I just want to reiterate that, like what John and Rich said, whenever we met with Phil, very personable person, easy to talk about games with. Listen to my critiques about shader compilation stutter, of all the things to complain to Phil Spencer about. Well, I mean, it's very important for the next box, so I think that's something that was good. And all that stuff for the next box was shaped by the team, the previous team. So it'll be interesting to see what extra twists come towards the end of the development of this current Xbox that's going to be coming out that bear the mark of Asha Sharma and their team on this. Whether or not it has more in the name itself, it's called like the Xbox AI box. I'm very curious to see like how if it's called something, I know you're joking about it, John, the Copilot box or something like that.
You're feeding into John's nightmares.
I know,
here.
but it's hard to.
This is like mind games, psychological
it feels
mind
that way.
games.
Like I was half expecting them to make the new CEO Copilot itself.
Yeah, right. Why do we even need these people? Yeah, so, I think Phil did as well as a job as anyone really could for a lot of aspects of Xbox's business, given what happened after Xbox One. I think the focus on Series X and Xbox One X was great. Higher power, something focusing about core gamer. Series S decision in the end is the thing that sold the most, but whether I like what its effect was on the entire industry, sometimes it's debatable. Whether I think that was a good idea or not, it depends on the day of the week. So I have in terms of the legacy of the business, I'm less than positive always with regards to Phil's career, but I think, a good person who listened to criticism, which is great.
Some supporter reactions here. Joe Tanko says, Phil Spencer gave a shout out on Twitter to Jeff Gertzman after his departure from Giant Bomb. Furthermore, I'm sure he okayed DF being allowed in on the Xbox Series S secret too. Phil was someone who had his finger on the pulse of gaming culture, so seeing him replaced by an AI exec just goes to show the direction of travel for Microsoft. No question here, just an observation. Alan, the infamous Alan from the Discord, the legendary Alan from the Discord. Hi guys, I don't think Phil Spencer retired. More likely given the option to save face. Asha Sharma, president of Microsoft's core AI product, said, as monetization and AI evolve and influence this future, we will not chase short-term efficiency or flood our ecosystem with soulless AI slop. Well, considering how invested in AI Microsoft are, I don't believe her. So I do think it's pretty clear that there is a degree of trust that needs to be earned here. And I guess we could only wait to see what happens. Actually, going back to what Joe was saying there about the Series S secret. That was that was quite an interesting story. I'm sure Phil was involved, of course.
Yeah,
I mean,
naturally,
he was there when we first saw the Series S. Yeah, but
that was funny because you're right. It wasn't it. Everything else had been so planned out, and I'm sure this was too. But we're just talking in the corner there with Phil and other people, and then Sarah just comes in with the handbag and like, oh yeah, we want to show you this real quick.
Yeah, and we did have a sort of NDA that only would expire when Microsoft said it would expire.
Right.
That, so we had to keep quiet on that for like 6 or 7 months. That was quite interesting. But just going back to the Xbox One X stuff that we did, I think back in 2017. Yeah. I'm sure Phil signed that off, but it was actually Albert Pinello that was my main point of contact there, who we lost recently.
What a nice guy, man.
Really?
Yeah, and super into his games, and I mean, it's when you're a journalist, it's kind of weird to have friends in executive C-suites, but when he left Microsoft, he did become a friend, and I was devastated when we lost him.
Yeah.
Going back to the topic there, I don't really know what more there is to add. There's, Asha Sharma saying that I guess that the things that people want to hear, and I hope it's followed through with action. But I do think that the plans that Microsoft have in place have been in place for a long time. Stuff like reaching out to the community war and that sort of thing is kind of like no-brainer stuff that should have been happening anyway.
And they had for a while, and then
I think they realized that associations with the more toxic levels of discourse online probably weren't a great idea. They had to redefine that, but it was a bit of a shame that we had fewer Xbox P3 tweets, right?
Yeah. No, so the thing Alan brings up here also kind of ties into my earlier point. When you read something like the soulless AI slop written in there, to me, this feels extremely engineered to speak to people that actually think this from somebody that doesn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I feel like those words are very specifically chosen for a reason, especially given how Satya himself was against that word earlier this year in that blog, where he was very mad about people calling AI stuff slop. Right. So like, to me, this feels like it's very specifically targeting people. So the whole thing just feels weird. Not to say I'm not willing to give somebody a chance, of course. Like there's just things about it that make me go like, oh, like, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't really think there's too much more to add to that. What I will say though is I'm just wondering how much of all of this is kind of like sort of downstream ramifications of that Activision Blizzard King acquisition.
Oh, almost certainly.
Which, in retrospect, based on what's happened with those franchises, there's the sense that they bought at peak, and it was just downhill from there for the likes of Call of Duty. I saw I don't know whether it was verified, but there was a story I saw about how they're possibly going to turn away from an annualized Call of Duty.
Good, they should.
They should, but when you think about the amount of money that it takes to make a Call of Duty, to sustain a Call of Duty, with all of those different teams and whatnot, then actually it's not as simple as it sounds.
No, I get it.
The burn rate to create a Call of Duty game is such that I think they kind of need to make a new one every year just to sustain it. So what's the alternative if you're not doing that? Firing people? I don't know how that all works out. But yeah, that's kind of like, that was kind of seen as like the killer move from Microsoft to kind of really sort of.
It was killer, just in the wrong sense.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what can I say? Let's just wait to see what happens. There's little more we can do. I guess the next step is basically what happens next with the next generation Xbox and the extent to which it can be a console in the traditional sense and can connect with the core audience in the traditional sense, which is kind of what they seem to be suggesting here. But how can it, based on everything we've heard? We need to hear more.
I think the final thing to say here is that they really need, I really hope the development studios owned by Microsoft are continued to allow to operate, because I feel like they're finally, in the last couple of years, we're seeing really good results. Like a lot of great games coming out of Microsoft and a lot more on the way. And I'm bummed out about some of the cancellations, but I do feel like they're they're awake and doing what they need to do again after years of struggling to get back here. And I would hate for leadership to come in and tear that stuff down. So hopefully they do not.